Our last video showed the progress on the cargo boxes, one of which we call the wet bay and houses our new water system. In this video, we'll walk through our custom camper's water supply and management system. And there's the current wet bay installed.
Right back.
You gonna show us? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, okay. After traveling a couple years in our 2000 Lance camper, we knew we wanted to create a more efficient system. The goals were to provide filtered drinking water, more efficient water heating, along with easier maintenance and management. Here's a diagram of the full system, and we'll walk through the areas one by one, including incoming water handling, heating, drinking, and monitoring. There's definitely a lot going on between the RO drinking water system, the mixing valves, hot and cold manifolds, the particulate filter, drinking storage, and the water heater and coolant heat exchanger, and more. The incoming water will pass through a pressure regulator with a gauge measuring incoming pressure and a second gauge measuring regulated camper pressure. The gauges sit in front of the water heater and are easily visible when the cargo box is open. Gets attached to here, comes into the wet bay, and then this is the particulate filter, big blue container down here. After the water is filtered, it travels to the freshwater tank. The freshwater tank will live in the truck cab, and we estimate a capacity over 65 gallons. A future enhancement will be adding a UV sterilizer. Before any water enters the tank, it will pass through the UV light, and this will enable us to safely fill the tank from natural water sources. We currently lug around three 3-gallon water jugs just for filtered drinking water, and we're looking forward to filtering our water on demand in the new camper. This is the drinking water reservoir. It is a 1.2 gallon tank and sits back in the corner behind Big Blue. The freshwater tank feeds into 2 levels of carbon filtration through the reverse osmosis filter and back into the drinking reservoir. Drinking water is supplied to the spigot on demand from the tank and through a remineralizing and polishing filter. This gives us good tasting and safe water on demand. So after the hot water is heated, it's going to come in and actually comes into this mixing valve when the cold water is coming in. Then this will actually feed into the hot water manifold. One back here is for cold water. And what that allows us to do is we bring in basically mixed water on the hot and the cold line to 120 degrees into the hot water setup that'll feed all the fixtures. And all of these can be turned on and off here at this control. If we needed to stop some water flow into a particular area, we can easily do it right here in the manifold. It makes it pretty slick and controllable. The other beauty of the way Steve laid this whole system out is within the camper itself, there will be no connections. It basically, the line that leaves here, leaves the manifold, will go straight to the fixture on the other end. There's no elbows, there's no connectors. The last item to review is the controller. Its function is to read temperatures in the bay and turn on heaters, as well as control the hot water heating.
I want to take a few minutes to discuss some of the aspects of electrical control of the wet bay. Most RVs don't have electrical control because they don't need electrical control. Most of the stuff that's in the wet bay beyond the automatic control of the water heater. I have some of those things, and I have many different requirements as well when I kind of explain them in turn. Okay, so one of the control things I do have in here, I have a 120 volt electric water tank that also has a 1400 watt electrical water heater in it. That has its own internal thermostat, so I literally set that to the standing temperature I expect, which is 125 degrees for electrical water heat, and turn it on, and it will heat water to 125 degrees and turn off. That is not the case with the diesel heating system. So there are several different methods for heating water in this camper, electrical being one of them. Diesel coolant heater and the diesel engine coolant heater, engine heating from the coolant, is also an intention. So what I have here in the top, and you will see a frame of what the fin plate heat exchanger looks like, is a coolant to water heat exchanger. And what this device does is it takes hot coolant from the engine or from the diesel-fired coolant heater, which will be mounted about right here, and it circulates that water through places that need heat. In this particular case, engine coolant probably runs at as somewhere between 200 and 220 degrees, so that coolant has a lot of potential to heat water, and it would be really nice to be able to be driving somewhere and be able to get there and know that as soon as you got there that you now have a whole tank of hot water. So how does this interface with the control system? So what I'm using for control are these. I have plans for 5 of these STC 3008 dual channel thermal controllers. These read in centigrade. Most of my thinking is in Fahrenheit, so you'll hopefully understand when I talk about Fahrenheit temperatures. But the goal here will be to use one of these devices to control the coolant heating system. And by that I mean how the coolant heating system circulates water as a separate pump. The pump is located behind the hot water manifold here. The coolant will flow through the heat exchanger from the engine water pump, and so you'll have a constant flow of coolant through the heat exchanger. The question would be, when will the control turn the pump on? So the pump needs to know 2 different things to decide whether it should be on or off. Number 1, is the heat exchanger over 100 degrees or thereabouts? I'm just picking 100 degrees as a number. So before the pump can turn on, there has to be a source of heat. So that source of heat could either come from the engine or from the diesel coolant heater, either of which, when fired up, will circulate coolant through the heat exchanger. And if there's 100 degrees of heat, then the first channel will say, okay, we have in excess of 100 degrees of heat, and close a relay authorizing pumping. But the other question we have to ask ourselves is, does the water tank need hot water? If the tank is already full of hot water, there's no reason to begin circulating water. Normally speaking, the tank probably wouldn't have hot water in it, so once I have heat in the heat exchanger, I can now turn the circulation pump on and begin heating water and pushing it into the hot water tank. And as soon as the hot water tank reaches, in my case, probably 150 degrees Fahrenheit, that's probably about as hot as I want the water to be. So at that point in time, I want the water to shut, the circulation pump to shut off, which will effectively stop the water from heating. The hot coolant will still continue to flow through the heat exchanger because that's the way that the heat exchanger works. It always has liquid flowing through it from the engine if the engine is on. So this enables me to get in the truck, drive somewhere, and without any concern of having to turn something on or off, to know that I'm going to have a hot tank of water when I get wherever I'm going. So on this here I have 2 sensors because I have a 10K thermistor sensor on the so I didn't show you this. There's 2 channels here. Each of these is a waterproof 10K thermistor, and you can see the count of that temperature is going up based upon just my body heat. Either of these 2 channels can be set for a heating control or a cooling control, and so I'm going to have both of them set. One is set as a heating control, and one is set as cooling control in the application. I have a sensor on the heat exchanger, a sensor on the tank, and a power lead for the pump power. So that's how the first controller is used. The second control I'm using is to ensure that the wet bay never freezes. In many RVs, about most of what you concentrate on is venting a hot air line from your central furnace into the wet bay and the tank storage area, and that's maybe it gets enough heat and maybe it doesn't. There's no way to know. There's no way to tell if it does or it doesn't. And I feel like it's essentially expensive enough and difficult enough repair that I want to know, and I want to have means to ensure that I don't have potential to freeze any of the water storage or any of the water management equipment in this bay. To that effect, I am building redundancy into this system. What I am going to work with is these. This is a homemade heater. I actually looked and tried to find what might be a 12-volt electric heater. I couldn't really find anything that had very good recommendations, and so what I have done is build my own. And what I have here, this is a aluminum fin with a copper center core heat exchanger. This is a CPU cooling fan. That's what this is. Came straight off of a modern computer. I drilled two 6mm holes in this copper plug in the center of it and inserted into it two 40-watt 12-volt cartridge heaters. These cartridge heaters, again, they produce about 40 watts, so there's combined heat capacity here of 80 watts. And that will heat the center core plug, and then the heat exchanger will distribute the air. There are two of these devices, one here and then another one in the back corner here. This one here is actually destined to go into the electrical bay, because I'm going to do the same thing in the electrical bay to ensure that my lithium batteries always remain above freezing. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to build a two-stage heater. The first stage will come on when I reach, let's say 3 degrees or 4 degrees above freezing. I'll turn one heater and the fan will come on together and produce 80 watts of electric heat. So there's 40 watts from each of the two, each device. And if the temperature were to actually drop, let's say if it was only 20 degrees outside, 80 watts of heat may be enough. But if it's 0 degrees or below zero outside, it may not be enough. So if I turn the first 80 watts of heat on and the temperature continues to drop in the compartment, if it drops by another couple degrees, the second heater will come on. So now each of these heaters has a capacity to produce 80 watts, 160 watts total for the cabinet, which should be enough. And again, these heaters will cycle on and off based on temperature. They're going to measure temperature in both the front and the rear of the cabinet. Right here is a 10K thermistor attached to the first two pins, and in the front there's another pair, and so there's 8 thermistors in this terminal block to determine and control all the things that are operating on temperature control in here. So this is the method by which I'm intending to keep this from freezing. I'm also going to have some of these controllers I'm going to have when I build my water tank. My water tank is going to have pad electrical heaters in it that will operate off of one of these things also. One will be a primary heater and one will be a secondary heater, built along the same rationale as this. One will kick on first. If it's insufficient, the second one will come on. It also has a redundancy one. Is if the first one fails to come on, the second one will at least provide some heat. But this is the control device. I'm going to have 5 of these in the camper to control a total of 10 different temperature-related things. But that is the control basis of my water system. If you have any questions, please put a comment in the comment field. If you have anything to add, please comment. Appreciate any advice. Thank you very much.
There are many options out there for creating a custom water system, and we hope by sharing our setup helps you to plan your own renovation project. Next up, we'll be finishing the doors, interior walls, and starting to paint. If you are a fellow do-it-yourselfer, like this video, and follow our progress over the next couple of months by subscribing. We hope to see you out on the road, and good luck with your own exploring.